seen some exciting stuff happen in the rates recently, Paul. Let's talk about that first.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. The rate world is moving, and it's finally moving for once in the last 3 years in the right direction. So we saw some huge drops on Friday. Everyone saw a nice drop in their 401ks on Monday. And all of that has had an impact on rates. So currently on a 30-year fixed on a conventional loan, we're in the like 6.375 range, which is almost 5/8 of a point lower than it was 30 days ago. The next drop that we see, and you've heard it here first, guys, is September 18th. It's not that part you haven't heard first, but I personally think it's going to be 50 basis points. Everyone's calling for 25, but I think there's way too much pressure, and it's way too late in the game where we haven't done anything all year. So I think we're going to see 50 basis points on September 18th.
Okay. What do you think that will do to the rate? Obviously, it's not a proportionate drop in rates, but what do you think that'll do to the rates?
I think we'll see our 30-year fixed rates at 6 if we keep moving in the same direction, even if we do see a 50 basis point drop, because there's a lot of other things happening economically. And we also have an election coming up, as in case you were living under a rock. So with that being said, there's a lot of pressure to make rates as affordable as possible right now. It's the way that it goes every election. So I think those two pressure points will make rates pretty good between mid-September and November. Okay, I wouldn't be shocked if after November we see a little roller coaster action, but which is pretty normal with an election too. So yeah, I would say get in while the getting's good. And the other thing to motivate your buyers is, a lot of people have a short memory. They want 2021 rates and 2024 prices. That's not the way it works, right? So it's good for everyone to get in ahead of the curve so they can be around and locked in and close, right after the September drop, but also not experience high prices from other buyers entering the market.
I have a question, and maybe you can help us because of your historical knowledge and experience with.
I'm old, guys. I've been doing this since 2020. Since 2001. Excuse me.
Yeah, I just for elections. So you does the current administration typically want to jumpstart the economy and have that illusion before the election, and then if that drives up inflation a little bit, they'll deal with it after?
So let's kind of go back. So when Trump was first elected, when his adversary was Hillary, that rates went up about 3/4 of a point within 24 hours of that election. It was chaos. So regardless of what side you're on, it was absolute mayhem, and it was not good for interest rates initially. Eventually they calmed down, but that's why I stress what I stress. So the whole term jumpstarting the economy is kind of the opposite of what we want interest rate wise, typically, right? If you're following rates, it's almost like you're storm chasing. Okay. So the more, the slower things are going, the more depressed the news is. Typically that has a positive impact on rates. So I don't really see it being as dramatic as it was then. The last election, it was pretty steady, and there was definitely a focus on jumpstarting the economy too with COVID. So I expect it to be, like I said, a little bit of a roller coaster, not as bad as it was, during the election that I mentioned. But I think that we'll probably see a little spike after our drop, and it will probably take 3 or 4 months at least for that to even back out.
Okay. So would you say what I'm getting at here is there's a little bit of pressure to go ahead and a little bit of urgency to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm the standing administration, no matter what, I want credit to be as affordable as possible, because people are happy when credit's like that. So if that's the case and you're going into an election, you want things to be affordable. So I think there's a lot of pressure for that to happen. And the thing that don't get me started on this, guys, but with the Fed, when we were trying to curb inflation back in 2021, they didn't do anything forever, which is why they had to take the wheel and jerk it as hard as possible to the right and just kind of completely derail the rate market, because they didn't do enough things gradually as time was going on, right? So I feel like we're going to see that again on the 18th. We're going to do a huge drop because we've, again, been too stubborn to turn the wheel when we needed to.
But it's just inflation's been keeping it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about, so you've got to be pretty excited about that overall.
Absolutely.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the changes with NAR and how that's going to affect the buyer brokerage compensation.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think it was, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I like how MLS snuck in the seller concessions on July 23rd, right? So it kind of gave everyone on the buyer side a hint on what could immediately be negotiable, right? So that was kind of interesting. But what happened before that on my side of the table is, of course, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and VA had to figure out whether or not they were going to allow this kind of stuff to happen, as far as the buyer paying those fees at closing, or the seller, or those being a part of seller concession. So I sent a lot of this information out, but it's good to get a refresher on this now. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, they all allow for it, okay? So what we'll do is I'll just kind of walk you through what those limitations are, and that way it's fresh, okay? So with conventional, if the buyer puts at least 10% down, then the most that they can get for seller concessions is 3%, okay? And that 3% is all encompassing. It's closing costs, buyer agent commission. It's 3% is 3% is 3%. It doesn't matter where it goes, okay? If the buyer puts any more than 10%, 10 to 20% down, then that number goes to 6% with conventional financing. And if they do any more than 20%, it goes to 9%, okay? So that's a big number at that point, right? So again, keep that in mind. That's primary residence conventional financing. If it's an investment property, regardless of the down payment, the most you're going to get in seller concessions is 2%. Okay. As far, and on the non-QM side of things, like your Alt-A, more non-conforming stuff, it's still all 6% regardless. For FHA, it's still at 6%. Okay. VA is a little tricky. It's always been a little tricky. Okay. So VA allows for the seller concessions to be paid by the veteran or the seller, okay? And everybody gets confused about the 4% rule. The 4% rule is, that's for a seller. Like, let's say that you have a buyer that doesn't quite qualify, the veteran doesn't quite qualify, and if they paid off a credit card or a car loan, they would. The seller can also give concessions towards that to make a veteran qualify. That's the 4% number. But the concessions for your commission can also be included on there, and there is no limitation as long as it's considered reasonable.
Okay. You have a question, Christina. You're on mute.
Hi. So for example, with, the way EXP is discussing doing things where they want the seller to just pay the selling agent directly, could they do, let's say, a conventional loan, 10%? Could they do 3% concession to the buyer and then still pay the seller's agent something on the HUD just directly from the seller to the seller's agent?
We don't care what's on the seller side of the transaction.
So that's okay then, that type of scenario?
Correct.
Okay. And what was FHA again with the consent? It's still the same thing? Still
6%, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, one thing too on VA, if the seller pays, like if the seller's paying the concession, it's not considered a seller's concession at all. Okay. So the seller can pay the commission towards the buyer's agent, plus the seller can pay sales concessions to the buyer, and they're not considered the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. VA is pretty loose.
Yeah, I think that's even a better answer for Christina's question too. because that's great. Yeah. So it's still just commission, guys. It doesn't change. Not a lot has changed. We have a lot of new forms, but not a lot has changed as far as sellers paying buyers commission and all that stuff. It does not have to be done through the loan or anything else. It can be just done like it's always been done. I think what we're talking about, and I don't know how many of these are going to happen. I think 10% of, what do you think, Paul? What do you think you're going to see? What do you think you're going to be involved in concessions for? I think 10% of deals maybe will be.
Yeah, that's another thing too that you brought up. First of all, most of the people that I've been talking about this lately, because a lot of folks were obviously, and some of you guys probably too, were getting a lot of these agreements signed like in the past week, right? For everybody that's already active. And I haven't heard a lot of pushback on it because it's just kind of par for the course now, right? This is what our industry looks like. But also where I think we'll have to be a team and very cohesive, guys, is when we have those first-time buyers that have little to no money, they're relying on down payment assistance, gift funds, and we want you guys to get paid, right? Because one thing that I find with agents and loan officers too is once you get in a habit of cutting your fees, it's just kind of a never-ending roller coaster, right? Or cutting your what you guys have earned. So my point with that is get with us on that early. Let us know where you want to be, and we can also accomplish a lot of that with lender credits to the buyer. So we can offer them rates that have higher premium for us, and we can give that back to the buyer so it lowers their closing costs. So it makes everything a little bit easier for you guys. I don't know if I answered your question, Ryan, but I wanted to make that point as well.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, I think it's going to happen a lot with people who are, first-time buyers or buying on the lower end and not cash-heavy buyers who are going to have to finance it. But I also think that you guys as listing agents are going to do a good job of letting your people know, look, this is a $300,000 house. We're going to get buyers who are FHA. They're barely going to be able to scratch together a down payment. We're going to have to offer some compensation to the buyer's broker.
I was in a class and I heard some cool scripting on it. And one of the agents that stood up and talked about on the listing side, talked about it. He said, to properly market this property, we want to mobilize the entire real estate community. And if we don't offer buyer agent commission, we're not going to do that. And the people that are seeing this property and want to see this property is going to be significantly less. So I like the way that they said mobilize the entire real estate community. And they also didn't call it a commission. They called it a finder's fee, which I kind of like too, because it's just language at that point. And it just kind of flowed well. So I think we're going to go. What's good about this is I think it's all going to make us all better too, because it's going to make us focus on our scripting, focus on our language and the way we deliver it for sure. Excellent.
I'm going to show you guys something. Paul, one of the things that we put on our form, guys, we have all new forms. They are on Paperless Pipeline as of today. They are fillable PDFs. You guys will love them. We have only done, they look just like everybody else's forms. We've only made minor modifications, including what I'm going to try to show to you right now. What we've added the box that says they only want to see it if the seller pays commission.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So now we can not be accused of not showing properties. Hold on one second. I want to see what this is. It should pop up here in a second. I'm going to go to page 4. See, it's all fillable PDF, guys. And here on the last page, it says, let me try to blow this up a little bit. By selecting this box, consumer requests to be shown only listed properties for which seller is offering buyer brokerage compensation. I'll have to fix that. But by selecting this box, consumer request to be shown only listed properties for which seller is offering buyer brokerage compensation. So there you go. But we have all the new forms on there. We have eliminated, as you will see on here, we've eliminated the arbitration. We don't want to do arbitration, but we left the part where disputes are settled and that if litigation arises, prevailing party will be entitled to recover reasonable attorney fees. So you don't have cases that are, what's the word for it? Stupid cases. What's the word for it? I'm sorry.
Litigation?
No, not litigation. The kind that are nonsense.
Frivolous.
Frivolous. Thank
Frivolous.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna
Frivolous.
start naming things. Yeah.
Frivolous. Just yell out words. It's perfect. Frivolous. So I want to show you guys that. But that's one of the things we're doing, Paul, to make the point that, yeah, if you want everybody mobilized, well, guess who's not going to be mobilized? Our agents who don't have to show those properties, unless they're going to be doing that. And so, because you're going to have some people who can't afford it,
Right.
and they can't, and maybe they need all 4% or they need all 6% or something that they could be offered in compensation or in concessions. Marcus, you have a question?
Yeah, so two part. If you can just reiterate the piece about the commission being paid, that it doesn't have to be shown on the buyer's side. How we're gonna? It doesn't matter which type of loan, right? Whether it's conventional, VA or FHA. But if it's going to be essentially a commission, is there a different way that we would word that on the contract? Because the contract still goes to the lender, so they would still see the commission. But as long as, I guess the key, if it's worded as commission, it doesn't have nothing to do with concession, essentially, if I understood. And that's the same for all three type of loans.
Well, we have to know about it because we have to put it on our documents. So it's
Okay.
if the buyer is paying it or the seller is paying it, we still have to disclose it. So I want to make sure
But it doesn't affect. So in other words, as long as on the contract it's listed as a commission, it won't affect, for example, that max 3% concession they can get, or
no,
I think you
that's
said
only
if
with
FHA,
VA.
it's a max 6.
Yeah. So with conventional and FHA, if the buyer's paying it, it 100% counts towards the 3 or the 6%.
And you broke up on my side.
If
That
the
was
seller's
what you
paying,
said,
seller's
VA or
paying.
FHA?
VA is the only one where it doesn't it's not considered that way.
Got it.
So
and
for
on
conventional,
FHA, just
go ahead.
no, and on the FHA, I think we have a lag. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So for conventional and FHA, it's all the same. If your commission is 3% and the seller is paying 3% in closing costs, they're going to get 3%. It doesn't matter where you put it. It's all the same. It's all dollars at that point, right? So it's not separate from that. They can't finance it.
All right, but essentially it could be 3% concessions and 3% commission.
Sure. Yep.
I guess this has to be worded properly on the contract.
Yeah, it could even be 3% concession and 4% commission, and then the buyer's just paying an extra. You know what I mean?
Correct. All right. And second question was just on the other item you discussed about verbiage and how listings can verbalize the commission. I forgot that word that you used, but in any sense, that would just be in the verbal presentation, because even if they got their listing agent, their listing a client to agree, however they verbalize it, we still can't list that anywhere, right? I just want to see if I missed something there with the way it was verbalized. You said it sound great, but it's still, we can't communicate that other than a phone call or email or something. It can't go on the MLS, even though we change the verbiage.
I can answer this one. So yes, you're right. You can't put it on the MLS still. He was just saying that we're going to mobilize the whole community, meaning we're opening it up to everyone if we offer this, because you guys are going to call. What's going to happen if you have a listing like this? You guys are going to call, and the listing agent is going to tell you, oh yeah, we're not paying any commission on this one, and you're going to take your client elsewhere or talk to your client and say, if you've got that form checked where I just showed you, you don't even have to discuss it with anybody, but you can talk to your client and say, this is the house you guys really, really wanted, just so you know you're going to have to pay me somehow. So we're going to have to negotiate concessions with the seller. Don't fall too in love with this house, because they might not, if they didn't want to pay a commission, they probably aren't going to concede anything either. Who knows, right? I mean, you don't have to, whatever, let's find out. But you are under no obligation to show it if they don't offer and your buyer has told you, I can't pay you. Let's not look at any like that.
Yep. And to clarify too,
Got
Marcus,
it,
on the
got it.
difference with VA, if the seller is paying the commission, it's not considered a seller concession. Okay. You can still have seller concessions on top of that.
Got
Yes. And
Understood.
we
All right.
talked
All
earlier.
right, thank you.
All right, we talked earlier about how they've added concession field when they took away. Well, I don't want to. I mean, I think we all kind of see it for what it is, but they were very clear. They were very clear. They were very clear that that's not what that's for.
Sorry, Ryan.
No, that's fine. They were very clear that's not what that's for. No, I mean, look, we're just talking here, but as far as anybody MLS is concerned, they were very clear that's not what that's for. So if the DOJ or anybody's listening to this conversation, there you go. Madeline.
Yes, hello. I actually have a two-part question. One is on the listing side. I work with a couple of agents there at your office, and what we're trying to see if we do is on the listing agreement, when they do, if their seller is contributing the buyer broker commission, let's say they're giving them 3%, what we're having them do is have them sign the seller to buyer broker agreement and stating that they will give them a commission on it, and then have them sign that as well. And we're putting that as part of the listing package. Is that okay to do?
I'm sorry, run that by me. So the listing agreement.
So let's say the listing agreement. Let's say the seller decide they're going to give a 6%, and we're going to give 3% to the buyer agent. And everything is signed off of. What we do is the seller to buyer broker agreement that states that they're willing to give the buyer agent, well, buyer broker a commission. We have them fill that out, but we don't put the buyer broker's name on it, but we put the 3%, and then we have the seller sign it as well. And then we send them that as part of the listing package. So this way we also have it in writing that this is what they're willing to give to the buyer agent as a commission.
Yeah, so I like having those pre-filled out. That's what we talked about last week. This is not a Paul question, but I like having those pre-filled out. So you're ready to go when someone asks you, because when I call you and ask about that and you say 3%, and I say, oh, well, I'll send over something saying that that's 3%. And you're going to say, oh, we've already got one ready for you. We'll send it over to you. You can fill it out.
Okay.
So you already have it on the listing agreement. So you're never going to have a conflict with your seller about that. But you're also, if it's on the listing agreement and you do, I'm just going to tell you paragraph 8, which is going to say 6%. And now it used to be paragraph 9 where you did the cooperating. Now it's paragraph 10.
Yeah.
If you do 10A, which you might as well, if they're saying it's going to be 6%, in 10A, you're going to fill it out like you used to, 3% to cooperate. If it's 10B, that's where the seller is going to pay. So he would only be 3% to you in the first one and 3% there to the buyer. It's gotten more complicated because of that. But
Okay.
what you're describing is where they're doing 6%. They're going to give Florida Realty Investments 6%, and we're going to give somebody else 3% for helping, right? For bringing the buyer.
Correct.
So that's old school, and that's fine. Go ahead and fill out the new form, the broker to broker compensation. You go ahead and fill those out at 3%. They don't sign them. You sign them. The seller doesn't sign them. You sign those, and you'll just have them ready to go. You cannot put them as an attachment. Obviously, on MLS, you cannot attach them in any way to MLS. You can only send them if somebody calls you and asks for it. So there you go.
Okay, and now my second question on the buyer side. When she's doing the contracts, what we're doing is we're putting what is it, page, goodness gracious, I think it's 12, where you put the disclosures and it says other, and we're marking that off and putting in there the buyer broker agreement as part of. I mean, is that are we able to do that as on there?
No, because that's none of the seller's business. So don't attach your buyer brokerage agreement to the contract. When you
If it's for I'm sorry, it's for it's to state that the seller is paying. It's the seller to buyer broker one. It's the one we're writing in there.
Okay, seller to yes.
The buyer broker.
You can do that. Yes.
Okay.
Unless if the seller, but not if the broker is paying. So you won't know which one. Just do the one that the seller should give you one. The listing agent should give you one. Should send you one.
Okay.
Nobody needs to sign that because it should already be signed by the seller.
Okay, sounds good.
So no, it shouldn't be part of the contract.
Okay.
All right. Now, Paul, tell us what you need to see when we have one that needs to have some kind of financing. Or do you need to see one anyway if somebody's borrowing money because you have to see money that they have to spend?
Yeah, we want to see one anyway. So we want to see it anyway. We want to know anyway, because that way they're asking us a lot of times for breakdowns before they go under contract, so they know what their cash to close is like. So if we don't know from y'all how much they're going to pay you, then we don't know what we're going to give them the wrong numbers, right? So we want to know that sooner rather than later, so we can make sure that we include that in our breakdowns. So it's now a part of our process to be asking those questions.
All right. Paul, aren't you from Buffalo?
My family is, yeah.
When did you pick up y'all?
When I lived in Missouri and North Carolina.
Okay. No further questions on that. Christina.
Yeah.
Christina. All right. I don't know if you're muted or what's going on. Let's do Mary. Okay, let's do Daryl.
I guess I'm next. So, as a listing agent, am I sending the compensation agreement over to everyone who calls and wants to tour my listing? Or am I waiting to tell them, okay, I'll send this over when you send an offer over?
Yeah, when they're serious, I guess, when they call and say, "Hey, Daryl, I'm thinking about sending an offer. We're going to send one around 4 o'clock today. I got to get we're excited about the property or whatever."
Right.
I don't know. I think if you answer me in text that's 2.5% or something like that, I'm going to be fine. 3%, whatever it is, I'm going to be fine, and I'm going to show the property, and then I'm going to say, "Daryl, they really liked it. Send me over that thing, and I'll send you an offer."
Okay, cool. That's exactly how I thought it was going to work. I just wanted to make sure that I'm doing it correctly.
Some people may want it before that. It's just however people want to do it. Some people's brokers might force them to have it before they show the property. Brokers are going to handle this all different. It's all new for everybody. So there's going to be a lot of nonsense out there. When I say nonsense, it might be genius. Maybe we'll end up doing it. I don't know yet because it's brand new. Okay. I know Mary fixed her mute problem, but I don't know if she has a question.
Yes, I have questions. One, I'm sorry.
No problem. Good.
Yeah, I just want to know if the buyer paid the commission. So it means the buyer need to put more down payment, or he need to prepare more money, right? Except the down payment, also the commission, right?
Yeah, if he's paying the commission, Paul, you can answer this question, I guess. If the buyer's paying the commission, they got to bring more money to closing. Now you're on mute.
Yeah, their closing costs will be higher, so they will be bringing more money to the table.
So is the buyer commission will be on the HUD statement as well?
Yeah, on the closing disclosure for sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, understand. Thank you.
Okay. So if the buyer needs $12,000 to close, they're buying a $300,000 house, and your buyer's brokerage thing is 3%. That's your agreement with them. They're going to need the $12,000 that they need to close for whatever all the other closing costs, and then they're going to need $9,000 more for you. There is a way to finance it in with Paul, but that's got to be done beforehand.
So can the buyer, the commission can get the mortgage only, or he have to definitely prepare the own money for the commission, buyer's agent's commission?
She's asking if it can be put into the mortgage. It can't unless there's a concession, right, Paul? Or if it
it can't be financed, but we can give a lender credit, which comes out of our pocket, or it's at the cost of a higher interest rate. So it lowers their other closing costs to essentially, make it as low as possible for them.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Christina, did you get your mute thing, or do you really want your hand up? All right. Do you guys have any other questions for Paul? Let me check the chat, Paul. The 3% even for builders, Olga wants to know if 3% even for builders, I think she's talking about the concession.
The concession laws are the same. It doesn't matter who's doing the loan.
Okay. Do you have to be, so it works on new builds too, I guess is what the question. Okay. Sam wants to know, do you have to be on a special list or a mortgage broker to originate USDA loans?
No.
No. Okay. There you go. Any other questions for Paul? Paul, tell us a little bit about what you guys have going on at Samaritan.
We have a lot going on, guys. Great question. I would love to talk to you guys individually, obviously, but we've got a lot of good things going on right now. We have a lot of new jumbo products that are out where we can put as little as 5% down. So that's something that we just rolled out. There's less than $30 million left, by the way, in Hometown Heroes. I wanted to touch on that as well. We have an entire team that's dedicated to you guys and whatever you can dream up marketing wise. So if you guys want to do client appreciation events, if you want to do open houses, I'm not the expert at that. I'm not, I never got any awards for being creative and stuff like that. So, but that's why I've hired people to do it. So if you guys have been lacking on reaching out to your existing database and, you know, doing appreciation events, all that kind of good stuff, if you can dream it, we can do it. So let us know what your ideas are with that and we can make it a reality. Aside from that, we also give a lot back. Our name Samaritan wasn't just picked out of a hat. So we've donated over $300,000 in the last 3 years to local Orlando charities here in Florida. So we're very proud of that. We were doing 4Ocean for a while where we were pulling trash from the ocean as well. So we're currently looking for another oceanic type charity. So if you have any, let us know what it is. And our next step, our phase 2, is we just opened up our own 501(c). So we will start doing a lot of events around that and a lot of cool stuff here in Orlando where we can kind of donate directly to families in need, kind of like an Undercover Boss style. If you guys have ever seen that show, the end of it's always like, you know, waterworks. So we're going to try to have people nominate people within the community that need help. So we actually see where the money's going that we've previously donated to charity in the past where you don't get to see where it's going. So that's kind of going to be our evolution, and that's how we got our name. So every transaction that we close, we put $200 into our charity, okay? And then, like I said, at the end of the year, the end of the quarter, just depending on who's in need and when, that's when we donate that. We have our fashion show coming up on August 24th with the Hope for More Foundation. So if you guys want any information on that, it's an awesome event. Everybody gets dressed up. It's at the Bentley dealership off I Drive. And it's for the Fane House, which takes foster children that age out of the foster system. So kids 18 to 24, and provides them additional housing, counseling, everything. So they're not just kind of thrown out at that point. So that whole night will be dedicated to that charity, and every dollar that we raise therein will go there. The last thing that I'll say is we've also have something called our Affinity Program, where if in a past life, you know, you guys were not in real estate, you know, forever, and you have any connections with human resources departments, other local companies, we will actually offer their employees a $2,500 credit for their closing if they close a transaction with us and with you, okay? So they can't just call us and say, my uncle's sister's brother is a realtor, so I want your $2,500, but I don't want to use Ryan Langley. That you don't get it at that point. So, you know, that's another additional lead source. So definitely, you know, hit us up for that and let us know how we can market those companies together. We always make sure they have some skin in the game, where it's not just a flyer on a bulletin board that nobody ever looks at. We have to actually be able to go in there twice a year, do some marketing with the employees, and it's worked out really well. We're on Advent Health, Delta right now. There's no company too big or too small. Sometimes with the big companies, you don't get a lot of conversion because there's just so much. And I've had companies with 15, 20 people that we close 3 or 4 deals a year with. That works out really well. So let me know if you want some more information on that. And the last thing that I'll say, I think I've said that a few times, is if you want to have a lender that utilizes technology and convenience for you, our Salesforce system and our CRM is second to none. It's too much to talk about in this call, but it will keep everybody organized for you. It'll keep you as efficient as possible. All your pre-approvals, closing cost calculators, payment calculators, and referring clients will all live in the same place. And the biggest thing is whether you do it or not, we're going to market those clients 5 times a year, agent forward marketing. So we're going to be putting you back in front of your clients no matter what. I don't know what the statistic is, but I think it's 70% of the people don't know their realtor's name after a year, right? And we will make sure that never happens. If anything, they'll see your name too much. That's all I got.
Awesome. We have a couple of things. Aldo wants to know regarding Hometown Hero or other government down payment assistance programs, how do they work with finance of buyer's agent commission payment by buyer?
It's all the same. It's exactly the same as everything else that we just mentioned. It doesn't make it any different.
Okay. Bonnie has a hand up.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hi. I just wanted to say I recently did my first deal with Samaritan Mortgage, and the technology was seamless. Like I barely had to pick up the phone and call anybody there. So it was great.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yep.
I'm
Awesome.
Venmoing you $20 for that right now. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Daryl.
So Paul, I've got a new listing that I'm putting on today, and just for my knowledge and everyone else's knowledge, it's got a 20-year-old roof, okay? Should I only list it taking conventional and cash? Because
No.
FHA, you only can have a roof for 2 years, so
That's
tell
not
everybody
true.
No?
Yeah, so that 2-year rule is not accurate. So when an appraiser goes into a property, whether it's conventional or FHA, they're going to look at it exactly the same way. So if it's 18 years old, I think you said, and the appraiser's goal is to make it from the car to the door without noticing anything roof-wise. Now, some will go a little extra and they'll look and see how old the roof actually is. But that 2-year rule that people kind of remember sometimes is if the appraiser does mention it, whether it's conventional, FHA, VA, whatever, they say, hey, this thing's at the end, right? There's no tread left on these tires. They will say we either need it replaced or an escrow holdback, or if we get a certified roofing contractor that states that they think there's at least a 2-year life expectancy left on this roof, then we're cool with it. So that could go for FHA or conventional. The only thing FHA actually cares about is peeling paint and rotting wood, period.
Okay, should I also include VA in that?
Same concept. Yep, 100%. The VA,
Okay.
the only other thing the VA cares about is a safety hazard to the veteran. So like if you have a pool, there's no water in it, or you have a like a porch that goes out of the backyard and there's no railing to go downstairs, the VA cares about that.
Okay.
I think the bigger problem you're going to have with that too, Daryl, is insurance. No matter what.
Yeah, good point. So any other questions, Paul? What is the Ocean Cleanup Foundation?
For Ocean, you guys have probably seen those bracelets, right? They've got those little beads on them. So they change every month, but basically every time you pre-approve someone with us, what we were doing is we would send a bracelet out to the client that we pre-approved. And every time we buy one of those bracelets, 4Ocean pulls out a pound of trash from the ocean. If you ever go to the beach and you see these ugly blue boats, that's their 4Ocean boats, okay? But they do it all over the world. So we've recently changed that because the shipping costs for the bracelets were like $7 or $8 a piece because of the way it was weighted. So we're looking for something else now. Where we're probably going to go with it is there's a company called Mang, if you guys have ever heard of them before. They take all of the seawalls and all the mangroves that they've ripped out of our intercoastal waterways, and they're replanting all of them. So we're probably going to switch to that. But if you guys have any other oceanic charities that we don't know about, let us know, because 4Ocean has it's just too expensive. It doesn't make sense right now.
All right, thank you. Okay, any more questions for Paul?
I'm going to say one more thing on Daryl's thing that I just thought of too. On the listing side, I would make sure that whoever is doing the lending, that they allow for roof escrow holdback, because I've worked with companies before where they do escrow holdbacks for very minor things, but a roof was something they had like a hard rule on, right? They were either okay with it or completely not. So that's the way that I would protect you and your seller, you know, above all.
Okay, great. Christina.
Okay, just real quick, I just want to recap. So conventional 3% down, they can get 3% concessions.
Correct.
Above 10%, they can get 6% concession, and then above, you said 50%, or was it
above 20%, they can get 9.
Okay. And then VA, they can do, what is the breakdown there?
So VA is a little more complicated. First of all, if the seller's paying the concession, it doesn't count towards any other sales concessions at all whatsoever.
Okay.
So outside of that, the seller can really pay for whatever's reasonable. Typically, it's not more than 2 discount points to buy the rate down, but all the other closing costs are fine. Okay. There's really no rule. On top of all of that I just mentioned, the seller can also pay 4% towards any of the buyer's outstanding liabilities.
Okay. So
that rarely comes up, but every once in a while it does.
Okay. So they can do the VA buyer can cover up to what for our commission again?
So the VA, there is no limit to what the VA buyer can pay.
Okay.
But the seller can pay whatever the buyer's agent's commission is, and it doesn't count towards any of the normal concessions.
Okay. And then in general, the concessions that they can get is what, 3%?
There's no limit. As long as it's
no limit. Okay.
2 discount points.
And then you're saying for investment, it's like a 2% seller concession cap.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else I should know about that, or?
No, that's pretty. Oh, there's another one. Nobody asked about second homes. Second homes follow the same guidance as primary residences.
Okay. And then maybe this is more of a Ryan question. If we are showing a home, this probably is more of a Ryan thing. So let's say I'm showing a home, like for example, I have a listing in Lake Mary. A seller called me and said, hey, I'm selling for sale by owner. I'm offering XYZ. Bring me a buyer. Do I need to send her, one question, do I send her something ahead of showing? I'm assuming yes, right? And then if we're requesting, you know, if somebody is saying, I'm not offering a commission, or, you know, hey, negotiate for your commission, how do you want that to appear on the contract? Does it necessarily need to be denoted as a commission or no?
Okay, so very interesting. And I saw a Facebook argument about this morning, which is pretty funny. On
Those are the best.
These masterminds. You can, right, because the buyer owes you in writing now a commission, you can negotiate a compensation on the contract now. You weren't supposed to before, now you can, because the seller owes, in a listed thing, the seller owes and the buyer owes. Because you have a buyer brokerage agreement with your buyer who owes you 3% now, or whatever you put on there, now they can have that on the contract, because they're negotiating how they're going to pay you is all they're doing, because they're going to have to pay you cash and closing unless otherwise noted somewhere. So yes, you can put that on the contract now. So yes, you can negotiate that when you call an a FSBO, they can say, well, I'll give you 3% if you give me, if you get me my 500,000, but if you only give me 480, I'm only giving you 2%, right? They can do that now, and you can put that on the contract.
Do we need to spell it out? Like this is, how do we?
But I would get a commission agreement just like you always have. That part hasn't changed. So there's still the good old fashioned commission agreement that I would have told you to send the FSBO before you show it anyway.
Okay. But if they're saying, hey, negotiate for it, when we're putting it on the contract, like are we, saying, hey, 3% towards.
You say in additional terms, you say, the seller will pay Florida Realty Investments 2.5% at closing.
Okay. So let's say they were doing like 3% closing costs and then 3% to me. Do we spell out the difference there, or we just? Of course,
buyer and seller agree. The seller will concede 3% toward the buyer's closing costs and prepaids. And then separately, seller will also pay Florida Realty Investments.
So we need to write it out that it is what it is for.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll have a separate agreement too, though.
Okay.
Send that with the contract.
Okay. So that we will send it. And is it different? It's all so confusing. I'm trying to still get my sea legs on this. Like, let's say it's another EXP where they're like, well, we want the seller to offer directly to you and not. So is there a separate form? I'm just trying to figure out what
commission
form.
agreement. But what if you send that commission agreement with it and they don't sign it? So they just sign the contract and don't sign that. So you write it on the contract as well. Write in the additional terms on the contract.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
do that now. You couldn't do that before because you got two people negotiating you out of a deal. They could negotiate you out of a commission. Now they can't because you have a signed legal agreement that they owe you.
Okay. So we're going to do a commission agreement and we're going to put it on the contract. So even if they don't sign the commission
Correct.
agreement, they've signed the contract and it's
Right.
there.
Right.
Okay. Is there a centralized place where all of the forms, I know our new buyer broker is in the reference section on Paperless Pipeline.
They're all in here.
Is there like, did any email, can you guys, if you haven't, can you send out, is there like something where it's like, here's all of our new forms, or I'm just trying to,
We can send it out. Yeah.
I feel like there's just been so many, I know, I don't mean to be a dum-dum, but there's been so many, like, I feel like it changes, not you guys, but between the attorneys and FR, and I'm just trying to get
Sure.
everything right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. So we just got these done. I just saw a glitch on one of them, so we're getting that fixed. So I mean, these just got in there, some of them 33 minutes ago, according to my computer. So we have just done these and just made them PDF fillable, so you guys can use them directly from there. Let's clear Paul up, and I'm gonna go over a few things with you guys. Any other questions for Paul? Paul, thank you very much for your time, buddy. You've been amazing as usual, and we're excited about the market, and we're excited about you guys, and we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
All right. See you, Paul. All right. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping stuff. One of the things that you guys desperately need to know, because we're going to require this on everything according to the new rules, is a compensation disclosure statement. You guys asked what they're going to do about the ones that we have sitting out there right now. And this is what they've done. And I've told you, let's just wait and see what they make you do. And here is what they're making you do. Let me share it. So you have a listing agreement that's out there right now. You have a buyer brokerage agreement that's out there right now. Well, you don't need it on buyer brokerage agreement because it already says it if you use the new one. If you have an old buyer brokerage agreement, or you have a listing agreement, which is obviously going to be a bunch of you, this is what they're making you do now. Notice this is all they're making you do, or this is the only thing this form says. Notice to buyer, seller, owner, brokerage compensation is not set by law and is fully negotiable. Okay. Although it's not really negotiable for them if they already have a listing agreement with you, unless they cancel the listing agreement and start all over. But we are requiring these. These are required now by the MLS, by everyone. So this is what is required because of the NAR settlement. Florida Realty Investments advises buyer, seller, owner, and he'll fill their name in here. Joe Smith. On the whatever a listing agreement was dated 6/11/24. Okay. And they've got to sign this. Actually, there's no word for them to sign it. I don't know why they did that. So this is not our form, but you have to do it. I don't know why they're requiring this. It doesn't say they signed it. But anyway, you got to deliver a copy to them on X amount, on X date, whatever date that was. Delivered on 8/7/24 by email. Okay. Yes, Christina.
Okay, so this is a form, I'm sorry, my thing cut out. So this is a form for the, for just the sellers, or for the lister, or just whoever? This is like,
It's for the listing agreements that you have now. I'm going to dive into this a little bit deeper, because if you have a buyer brokerage agreement, that's a new one, it'll already say that. So anything going forward from here, you won't need this. You just
Okay.
But
so I need to send this to any listings that I have now,
correct.
even if it's in the listing agreement?
Yep. Well,
Okay.
not if it's in the listing agreement. Not if you used a newer listing agreement. Not if you got a listing agreement recently that says this on there. But if it's
No,
got
I have the older ones.
Okay, the older listing agreements, you send that. I don't see the point in this, but they're requiring it. We're requiring it.
Yeah, I'm like, what's the, okay.
So that's how that works. These are on anything you have going on now. You guys have been asking about, what about our current ones? Obviously, they've taken off the compensation from the MLS. You'll see that that's gone now as of a couple of days ago. And now we need these forms done. Lori, you have a question?
Yes, I have an old listing. I send them this form. There's two, the husband and wife. I send each one an email with this form, but how do I prove that I have complied?
No, you'll have a copy of the email, and you'll send it to us. And you did this. You sent it by email on that date. So you just
Okay, so when I send it, I'll just copy you.
No, don't copy me. No, God, no. Just send this form.
Blind copy.
Just
I mean,
upload.
blind
No,
copy.
don't blind to no. I don't want it at all. Send it to, they'll flood my email. All you guys doing all this. Send it to upload this form. Just upload this form like you normally would. So like
Oh,
this.
so it'll just be sitting there in the paperless pipeline.
Yes. There's going to be a checkbox on it. So Michaela's going to be looking for it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Bonnie Black.
Hi, Ryan. So quick, kind of a two-part question. So I have a couple of old buyer broker agreements out there. And for whatever reason, they've had personal things happen and their search is kind of on hold and they've been a bit unresponsive. So if I send this to them, they don't sign it, then what?
Oh, yeah, they're not signing it anyway. You're just sending it to them.
Oh, I'm just sending it to them. Okay,
This
gotcha.
is yep. I guess you're on the honor system that you send it to them.
I'm so used to them signing everything. And then the next question that Lori just asked about, and you said upload these into paperless pipeline. Should we now be uploading every buyer broker agreement that we get, or only
No.
when we have a transaction?
Only when you have a transaction. Great question.
Okay.
Only when you have
Okay.
a transaction.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Malvis. Malvis, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Hello, everyone. Is anybody on this call, have had a conversation with their seller that have previously signed the old listing agreement? Have you had a conversation about the changes that are coming and whatnot? And what, because I like to keep things simple instead of complicating. So Ryan, I have a listing that it's off the market because the seller is doing some changes in the house. And honestly, I don't know if we're going to move forward or not, but I have the listing. We renew it, and I'm hoping to put back that listing on the market within the next 2 to 3 weeks. But I'm trying to find the best way to simplify and talk to the seller about whatever changes now that I have to send them this form. What would be a best practice if anybody have had that conversation with an older seller, or a seller prior to, not older, but you know what I'm saying, prior to this whole mess? Has anybody talked to their seller about any of this, and how was your conversation?
Does anybody want to chime in on that in the chat or in person?
I've talked to my sellers and nothing's really changed that much. I'm still giving buyers or buyer brokers commissions out just like I always have, just like they always have. I tell them that, yeah, the rules have changed, and they have to sign another form, but that's pretty much all that's changed. Not a whole lot in my world.
Okay. And Pollock says, hers took it well. Their listing is not selling, so they'll do anything it takes. And I think that's going to be.
Have any of you tell them now that, they're obviously, we all have a listing agreement. My sellers agree to pay 6%, which is what I'm splitting 3 and 3. But have you gone back to those previous listing agreements and say, hey, by the way, these are the new rules? I guess I'm trying to find the best way. I have a seller that he asked he makes things and tends to complicate things. So I'm trying to simplify the way that I explain these new rules to them without complicating anything.
Okay. He doesn't have to offer the 3% anymore. He never had to. He only had to offer $1 before. He doesn't have to offer the 3%, but as to use the words Paul just gave us, if he wants to mobilize the entire community, he needs to offer a good percentage. His house isn't selling as it is. I don't know why. I don't think it would help to lower how much have them raise the price and lower the commission. Yeah, it pays out if it's the house isn't selling. Being
Right.
sarcastic, don't have them raise the price. So that's kind of where he's at. Like Pollock said in the chat, they'll do anything to sell their house, of course. Pollock, do you want to answer that question, or do you have a different question?
No, I just wanted to answer. So I just told them, like, really, well, I was very upfront. I just told them that, okay, moving forward, you don't have to pay the buyer's broker. But I immediately told them that you have to understand that most buyers are, they don't have like 10, 20,000 extra sitting in their account. So it's not like you essentially would be locking out people from making offers on your property, because the moment their agent asks, like, hey, am I getting paid? I'm just gonna have to say no. And they go back, they tell their client that, hey, I'm not getting paid. You're the ones who need to pay me. And then they just freak out and not proceed with an offer. And that did the trick. They're like, it's not selling, I'll do anything to sell. So yeah, I was very upfront with them.
Yeah, I will be very upfront as well. I'm just trying to look at the best way to explain these things without complicating anything. Now that we have to have that form signed, because not every seller is the same. Some of them are more complicated than others. Some of them, you have two sellers that they don't agree upon something, and they become more difficult. So I'm just trying to look for better words and better way to explain these things without hiding anything, of course, and being upfront, but also any best practices that anybody have used to.
I'll just say this, like, we try to explain them the best we can. If they're still stubborn, let them have their way. They might learn a lesson, they might come back. We just have to, we try our best, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tracy, to answer your question in chat, I would say no. And we'll work on that on our end. It's already under contract. It's not negotiable at this point. But we'll figure that out. If there is one, we'll let you know. Mary Lou. Okay, Lori.
I think what she was asking for is if we have anything like a Mike Ferry dialogue that we can get solid and use it, and it should be the easiest way to go. Is there like a Mike Ferry dialogue on how to explain this to people who have, for historical sense, only operated in one way regarding listings, and now all of a sudden, if we're already confused, what are they going to feel? Confused.
But no, you're more confused because you're thinking about it more. They don't need to even think about it. They're offering the same thing. Do you want people to buy your house? They had to offer $1 before, Lori. Now they have to offer $0. So it's only changed.
But whatever they're offering, the lower it is, the longer they'll be on the market.
There you go. It sounds like Mike Ferry right there. That was perfect.
Well,
I'm being serious. It's always been that way. They could have offered $1 before.
Yeah, you lower the commission, you raise the daily market.
Now the best practices is just to say you had to offer $1 before. Now you don't have to offer anything. You've always historically offered 2.5% or 3%. That's what buyers agents are going to move for. That's how it works. You want to sell your property, or do you not? Do you want to mobilize the entire real estate industry, or do you want to only have people who can afford way more nice houses than your house? I don't know if you know how America works, but here, people buy the absolute most house they can buy for whatever they can fit in their budget. They're going to buy the nicest house they can. They're not going to. Nobody's buying a $300,000 house with a bunch of money in the bank to live in. Very few people are doing that if they can afford more. And if you do, you guys know how many people are doing that. How many people are spending their last $300,000 on a $300,000 house? If they have $300,000, they're going to put $50,000 into a house and keep the money for something else. And hopefully invest it or do something with it. But that's what they're going to do. It's people can't afford to pay typically their buyer's broker on their own. They want to work it into the deal. Mary Lou, do you have a question?
Yes, I just want to know, I had one contract is already pending. So do I still need to send the form You
I
could
don't,
ask,
I don't, if, to your seller, no, it's, don't worry about it. I'll work on that. I'll let you know if you do. But that doesn't make sense.
yeah,
You're-
because the closing will be on the 26th.
yeah, and it's
this
not,
month.
and now it's not negotiable. So it's already under
Okay.
contract, so it's not negotiable anymore.
Okay,
Pollock,
thank you.
you bet. Pollock.
Hi, I do have a question. I mean, it's not really a question, it's more of a concern with what the other, what the big names are doing, like Zillow. They have an agreement out, which basically says, to the buyers, we're gonna give you free tours for like a week. I'm gonna post like a link to that in the chat. And because I believe we can do that. We have to use our forms. I mean, it's a stupid thing to do, of course, but then it's kind of like incentivizing the buyer to like, hey, let's, work for like a week until you're comfortable. And then if you choose to make an offer, then we'll have you sign a separate agreement. That's just Zillow. And then Redfin, I'm really not sure. They're not a part of the MLS, but again, I'm posting a link in the chat. They have a program that they do not require any agreements from the buyers, and then they do have a program to incentivize the buyer to sign an agreement.
I'm going to answer all your questions right now. I'm going to share
Okay.
this form, and I'm going to answer all your questions because this is our answer to that. This is what you need to be using. This is a FARBAR form that we have only changed one part of. And here it is. Pre-touring agreement. Okay, here you go. It's on your paperless pipeline, guys. Under the reference tab, there's a new thing called new forms, which eventually will change the name to the buyer forms. But right now it says new forms to draw your attention to it. I am a real estate licensee with Florida Realty Investments. Consumers, whoever they are, and if there's more than two, write them all down here, will use broker services to view properties the parties mutually agree upon for blank days from the date of the last party signed this agreement. Look, you do not owe, broker submissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. You do not owe broker any compensation at this time. If you wish to work with broker to purchase property, broker shows you broker's compensation for services broker provides will be as follows. Flat fee, percentage of the gross purchase price plus $350 if you want, or other. If you wish to work with broker to purchase a property, broker may ask you to sign a separate agreement detailing the party's responsibilities during the sale. That's the buyer brokerage agreement. A seller or listing broker may agree to pay some or part of the above compensation. The seller or listing broker agrees to pay broker for broker services. Broker will reduce the amount you owe accordingly. So if they give you 2.5% and you've got 3% here, that's what it is. If you choose a property already listed by broker, seller may pay broker for broker services performed for seller, and you will not be responsible for this compensation. Broker's compensation from any source will not exceed the amount of compensation in a written agreement with you. Here we go. This is where they sign. Now, that is not a daunting buyer brokerage agreement for them to sign. It doesn't have any time limit other than up here, but does not have a what we call a tail on it, which is the time afterward, after the agreement runs out. Protection period, we call it. It does not have a protection period. This is something you can do, and then when they want to buy this house that you show them, you have them sign a buyer brokerage agreement with the contract. That makes sense. That is a nice, easy form. Nobody will have a hard time doing this.
Thank you, Ryan.
That is our answer to this. So that is something you guys can do. And it says, and we added this, by selecting this box, consumer request to be shown only listed properties for which seller is offering buyer broker compensation. So in other words, I just told you you're going to owe me 3%, but we're only going to do the ones where we're getting paid by the seller. Okay? That is absolutely no risk by the buyer here, right? Very little. And you tell them that this is what we need. Then this covers us. This is a property pre-touring agreement. This is what the rules are now, that you have to get something signed. This counts. All right. And that is on your paperless pipeline. Marcus.
So that form you just showed us, that would be in addition to the buyer broker. It would be
you do it before that.
one prior to.
Right. You do it before that, Marcus. You do it before you show a house. Say, oh, yeah, I've got this. I'll send it right over to you. They're not going to have a bunch of questions about this because there's nothing that no, it doesn't. Let me hold a second. So this is what you have them sign originally. Then when you have them, if they want to go under contract or something, you want to make an offer on something, they sign a buyer brokerage agreement with that. So you send it over with the offer for them to sign. Okay.
Okay, so the buyer broker talks about, I guess,
What is
mentions exclusive, like exclusive. This doesn't really talk about anything being exclusive, so it's less, I
It
guess.
does not. It's less binding. It's easier for them to sign. It's something you can sign just to
Less binding, but doesn't also offer them more of an outlet, since the other one clearly says exclusive. This does not give them a little more of a window.
This gives them more wiggle room. I prefer you go get the buyer brokerage agreement, but if you're worried about it, like what Pollock was just asking, then just do this one. And it does. And so Ida asked him the questions. Is it just one property? No, this is, if you read that second line, consumers, blank and blank, collectively consumer, will use broker services to view properties the parties mutually agree upon for blank days. So you can do it for, we're going, guys want to look at properties this weekend? Let's put it on there for 4 days. All right. Or whatever it is.
Thank you.
Yes, Tracy. Yes, it's a kind of a blind date agreement to get things started. Yep. They don't know you. They don't like you yet. They just called off of something. You're going to have them sign this. Okay. I can't see my lip. Pablo.
Yes. Can we use this form to show, a listing on an open house? Let's say I'm on an open house and somebody comes in without a realtor. Can I use this
You
form?
don't need one for that. They've determined you do not need a form for that.
Oh, okay.
Yep. They've determined you don't need a form for that, but if you're going to take them out to look at open houses, you'll get this signed.
All right. I was just thinking that if then they decide to make an offer, I have this form already saying, I show you this property, or does it matter?
No, not this form. You'd go ahead and do the buyer brokerage one if they want to make an offer. So you've got an open house. They come in without a realtor. They don't have a realtor. They don't know a realtor. They didn't sign anything with anybody. You're going to write the offer for them. Then you would just go ahead and put the buyer brokerage agreement in the offer.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Bonnie.
Hi. So this form does not protect us if we show, say, 123 Main Street, because the buyer just wanted to get out and see it, and then they go to the agent they want to work with.
Correct.
Okay.
There's nothing on here that says that. It says several times, if you wish to work with broker.
Right.
If you wish to work with broker.
Is there anything we could use to protect us from that?
Buyer brokerage agreement.
Okay.
Let me look at something else real quick.
Sorry, Bonnie, I just wanted to add to that because I just used this form for, I have an out-of-state buyer visiting this weekend. They freaked out because they hadn't met me, of course, with like the exclusive agreement. So with this agreement, though, if you limit it, like we limited our agreement to say 3 days, they just wanted to do it for 1 or 2 days. So that way you as an agent are making sure, like I wanted to make sure I'm spending no more than 3 days of my time with them, like giving them tours. I know that they anyways be visiting for a short time. And then I'm going to give them a chance to think about it. And then if they say, okay, I want to make an offer on 123 whatever street that we saw earlier, that's when I'm going to follow up with the exclusive agreement. That's what we talked about. And that kind of like put them at ease, not having to sign like a 2 or 3 page document with like so much legal verbiage. It was hard for them. And then I did email them a blank copy beforehand so they could familiarize themselves with like the pre-touring agreement. And once they were comfortable is when I sent them the pre-touring agreement for e-sign. And that's what I'm going to do moving forward, like maybe max, like what Zillow's doing, like 7 days, like put whatever time you're comfortable. I guess I'm just comfortable. I don't want to spend more than like 3-4 days with a buyer, just, driving them around town if they don't want to commit to me. I mean, you don't need like a month to get used to, like, to make sure that you want to use this person to buy a house or not. I mean, yeah. That's what I plan to do, so just to share that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, that's what that's for, kind of a blind date agreement there. And someone put that in the chat as well. This is the showing agreement. Bonnie, you asked about which a little bit stronger. Sorry, somebody asked something a little bit stronger. This is the showing agreement. This does bind them. So if you want to do one of these, you can. This is like the buyer brokerage agreement, but much shorter, and it's just for showing certain properties. Okay, you see the list of properties here, and we also added to this one by selecting this box. Consumer request to be shown only listed properties for which seller is offering buyer brokerage compensation.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And we were going to add stuff that says that you get paid at closing, but they all say that somewhere in them. So we're covered on that as well. David, for leads that are getting search results daily from MLS, should we cut them off? They don't sign anything. No, you don't really need to ask them to until you show them property. You have to physically show them properties, but just sending people stuff on MLS does not count. Let me see. Any other questions? We are creating new checklists. They will have the buyer brokerage agreement in them for when you have a buyer side transaction. And we'll be adding stuff to them and subtracting stuff as we go, as we kind of all figure this stuff out together. So any other questions? We'll go to Malvis.
Yes, again, so the pre-touring forms, I get that sign as I get the buyers to agree with me that I would only show them properties that I find that the sellers are paying me commission, correct?
You don't have to, but yes.
Okay, then buyer brokers agreement, I can get that sign to protect myself, getting paid. If the buyer wants to see a property that the sellers are not offering commission so that the buyer can pay me.
No, that has nothing to do with it.
That has nothing to do with it.
Nope. You can opt out of that on either one, on either form. You can opt out of the showing ones that the buyer doesn't. That has nothing to do with it. No, the buyer brokerage agreement, the buyer brokerage agreement we need signed because it's binding. The pre-touring one is not. Well, if they're going to contract with it, that's fine. But if you want to be protected, buyer brokerage agreement is one you want to use with. They're going to sign a contract with you. Have them sign that as part of it.
So I can still have the buyer broker agreement for the buyer to pay me 3% or 2% or whatever it is, and still show a house, and that the seller is willing not to pay, but still ask for it, and not have the buyer pay me, have the seller pay me.
Somebody's got to pay you. So
yes.
You got to figure it out with the buyer or the seller. But if the seller doesn't offer it, or doesn't offer concessions for it, then the buyer's going to have to pay it, or find a different house. Which is why we check that box. If the buyer says, I can't pay it, I can't pay you the commission otherwise, just say, well, we're not going to show you houses where the seller doesn't pay it then. That makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Good, because I want the seller to pay it. The pre-touring agreement, Marcus, and then the showing agreement. Pre-touring and then the showing. David, should we change the language to seller is paying entire commission? Seems to leave a conflict. It's as stated. No, it doesn't. Yes, there's a conflict. There's always going to be a conflict. If you have 3% on your agreement and they're only offering 2.5%, then you have to just tell the client you won't pursue it. Tell the buyer you won't pursue it, or tell them you will pursue it, or we'll have to find it somewhere else. Or if they're only offering 1% commission, David, and you want 3%, your agreement says 3%. Tell the buyer we're going to negotiate for 2% on this contract. And if we can only get 1.5% or 1%, then I'll let you off the hook for the other 1%. Okay. So yeah, there's always going to be a conflict. I mean, every time you have 3% and somebody offers you 2.5%, you're going to have to address it at some point. And you got to decide, are you going to chase somebody for that 0.5%, or are you just going to let it slide? Any other questions? All right, guys. Well, we'll discuss this more next week. We'll go over all these forms. Nothing kicks in for real until the 17th, but we're using everything now. MLS has asked that we started using all the forms and doing all that stuff now. So even though they just released one yesterday. So we're doing everything we can, and we'll have another update on this next week. We'll go through all these forms, and we'll get you guys set. All right. See you next week, guys. Thank you.
Bye, Ryan. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.